with a very characteristic sound, the vacuum. I saw the books, they were perfect enough, and I felt very happy to work on this unique project.
This was going to be a long day. The dried books were to be sorted and moved to the repair rooms. The freeze dryer had to be cleaned and dried, and the next batch of books would come out of the freezer for processing. This would be the routine once a week for the next 20 weeks. Now came the second stage of recovery. Sorting and repairing had been going on ever since the first batch of books came out of the cold store, using techniques they had learnt during Gary's initial workshop. A biocide solution would neutralize acid and kill mold. And then, of course, the paper had to be dried again. Most of these books were to be rebound, but first the loose pages were prepared for microfilming. In the middle of this period was the monsoon. Ever since the flood 2 years back, this has been a time of anxiety, and precautions are always taken.
We have worried because our worry was the books are retrieved, where to keep. So we already started preparing the space so that the mistake will never be repeated.
Well, for us, the continued process of loading and emptying our unit in the work that we do becomes rather predictable. None of that was the case here. Every load was new, every load was different. They had a continual or a gradual change in staffing, in the volunteers that were involved. They had new challenges with each load. They encountered different kinds of mold and different degrees of deterioration in the books with each load. And mixed in all that, it was interesting to see that we had ever-increasing confidence in the Hyderabad crew.
The last load was a special one. The Canadians wouldn't be returning for their equipment till next week, so they had managed the processing of all 20 loads entirely on their own.
Actually, when that last load went in, there was a bunch of celebration because Murli and Sambi Reddy and a number of the senior members of the team over here were very involved in the final load. They all wanted to touch the final load. They all wanted to put their imprint on it. When we returned to Hyderabad to finish this project and collect our equipment and move on to the next one, yes, we were naturally curious to know how the equipment had lasted, what condition it was in. It's kind of like returning home after the vacation and, checking to see that there's no water leaking on the floor or something.
Yeah, that's a little problem. It's not too bad. Is that as bad as it was?
No, it was quite bad. We made some provision for it not to.
I think I know what the problem was on this. They've got to be pulling out about 300 to 400 gallons of water per load out of this.
To celebrate the SVK's achievement, there was a public meeting. Archivists and librarians from all over the region came to hear about the paper restoration methods used by the Cromwell Belfour team.
Thank you for coming. It's very good of you to take the time to learn of the results of our efforts here, to learn a bit more about the SVK. And it's been our pleasure to tell you a bit about Cromwell and our parent company Belfour.
Afterwards, there was a traditional lunch for 350 guests, including delicacies and local flavours, many of which are only served on special occasions.
That's curd? Oh, curd, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. This kind of a thing has not been done before. That's right. Yeah. We're very pleased to be part of that.
Duty is the gentleman who made your stabilizer.
Oh, the stabilizer, right. Hello. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And finally, the last load, the 20th out of the machine. Despite 5 months of exhausting, repetitive work, the excitement was still there. For 20 weeks there had been celebration in that room.
Yeah, one of the images that I'll remember always, I think, was watching them take the last remaining bits of ice out of the unit as they were defrosting it. One of the fellows carried a bucket of water out to the street, poured it into the drain, and I thought, there it is, full circle. The flood water that had saturated so many books is now back into the system.
Celebrations aside, the Canadians still had a job to do. The freeze dryer was about to leave, already booked to deal with a new crisis in Europe. It was now going to Belfour, Paris, where a serious backlog of frozen documents was waiting for processing.
Moving the equipment was a challenge every time, communicating with the staff, with the crane operators and so on. We had so many delays. Everything that we tried to do, which seemed, in theory, very simple to do, there was a delay involved. So when it came to actually moving the equipment and having all the components come together and safely lift this very heavy piece of equipment onto a truck and then send it down the road, countless delays. I think we had the final move planned for late morning. I believe the original plan was to have the crane arrive at 11 or something like that. And then it seemed it would be noon, and then it seemed it would be 2. And it was actually, I think, 2 or 3 in the morning.
It had taken them over 2 years, thousands of man-hours, to overcome the ravage of that flood.
Let's get these fellows down off the top, please.
Even to attempt something like that was extraordinary. It's an incredible achievement. And now I had discovered that there was more to the story of the flood. I had never understood how it had happened the way it did. That wall of water on a sunny day didn't make sense. The official story was that the Hussain Sagar, a man-made lake in the centre of the city, was in danger of breaching its banks. Its south side was contained by a dam 100 feet above ground level. Early on the morning of August 24th, city engineers, worried that water pressure would burst the dam, released water into runaway channels going to the south. But I learned there was another scenario. At the side of the lake is a hotel, and they were worried that the gardens might be flooded. To avoid this, there was apparently a bribe. Workers were instructed to reduce the water level immediately. The floodgates were opened, and millions of gallons of water were released all at once. The water channels simply could not cope. This flood need never have happened. There is no question that this was a disaster, and yet, because of it, SVK was forced to take action, and the collection is now in better shape than ever.
It did two things, in the sense that one, it made us happy because we recovered everything. Second, this whole experience actually has pushed us into a very high gear of action. Really, earlier it was unthinkable to think of going in a big way into technology, spending money and doing it. Now with this, and we have now decided to go for a huge center with good investment, a lot of space, and develop that into a research center.
There is none. I am relieved of this mental agony, all these days I am suffering. I am completely relieved.
I think it's a sense of pride in being part of a team effort that's been so successful at the end of the day.
And everyone who visited here, they were all appreciating us like anything, that we are doing a wonderful job with these books. Whoever saw the complete end product, they were very happy about it. Our spirits were very high at that time. Whenever any person comes in and tell you're doing such a fantastic job, we are very. This comes from my heart actually. We could not express it completely.
The way they've learned to cope with things that don't work out the first time. In our society, we need things to happen, and we need things to happen quickly. Or it always seems to be that way. In India, things move slowly. If it doesn't happen, manana, next day it will happen. And true enough, it does.
I feel that this is one of those once-in-a-lifetime events. I feel this is a situation that we probably, in our careers, we don't do these things twice.